Well, welcome to the Frontline Club. We're going to be. I was asked to moderate this, dealing with two areas. One, an overview of the situation in Sri Lanka now, especially the conflict, and secondly, the journalistic difficulties of covering. So we're going to do both of those. I mean, they overlap, obviously. But I should introduce myself. My name's George Arney. My rather flimsy qualification for being in this chair is that I was a BBC correspondent in Sri Lanka in the mid-90s, rather eventful years. I've only sort of kept an intermittent eye on what's been happening since then myself. I suppose in the interest of full disclosure, I should say I was actually made persona non grata when I went back to cover an election in the year 2000, and I haven't been allowed back in Sri Lanka since then. But I prefer not to talk about it, if that's all right. So I don't know that much, or at least not in any great detail, but luckily I'm only here to sort of hold the ring with these four experts, two Sri Lankans, two non-Sri Lankans. I thought rather than me introducing you, since we've only just met ourselves down in the bar, I'd ask each of you just to say your name and just a few words about yourselves and what you're bringing to the discussion. So if we start at your end, Sumatra.
Hi, I'm Shumantra Bose. I'm a professor of international and comparative politics at the London School of Economics. I happen to have a long-standing interest in Sri Lanka and in the main conflict in Sri Lanka, going back 20 years now. But I've been to Sri Lanka a number of times, as George has. I'm also supposedly a specialist in comparative conflict resolution, but I end up being, more a specialist in conflict, and there's very little on resolution, and this applies to this case among many others.
I'm Sumant Deshapriya from Sri Lanka. I'm the convener of the Free Media Movement, the watchdog, media watchdog in Sri Lanka. Then I head the media unit of a Center for Policy Alternatives, which is a policy advocacy think tank. At the same time, I work as a South Asia coordinator for INSI, that is International News Safety Institute. And I have been a journalist for the last 25 years. And currently, I focus on media freedom and human rights issues. I has been doing this last 15 years. I've been in the forefront of media freedom struggle in Sri Lanka.
Just before we go on, is everybody hearing at the back? Are you okay?
Yeah, my name is Juliana Rufus. I'm a reporter with Al Jazeera International, and more specifically the current affairs strand there, which is called People in Power. So rather than doing news, I do a longer program, and longer these days in TV, meaning about 21 minutes, which allow a degree of analysis. And I've covered Sri Lanka for a while and keep going back, and earlier this year I made 3 different films on very different aspects of the conflict in Sri Lanka. One about the humanitarian situation in the east and the effect of the government's pro-war strategy. Another film about the JVP and the Buddhist monks who are behind the pro-war policy of the government. And a third film about LTT fundraising in London, which is sometimes, well, the LTT, yeah, of course, are banned, and allegations of extortion. So I've reported as a foreign reporter in Sri Lanka, and you've reported as a, and you're still continuing to report.
Yeah. So I'm Namraja Puruparan. I'm working ABC Radio Network, head of Tamil News, and I've been last 16 years in media field. That's all.
Okay, well, let's start with the sort of overview of where we are in Sri Lanka. And as I said, I don't know that much, so it might be worth just trying to gauge the audience, actually, how much you all know. I thought I'd try this out and see what happened. A couple of questions to you. Could you put up your hand if you do not know where Batticaloa is? Not many. Could you put up your hand if you don't know the first name of the Tiger leader? Okay, so most people, don't feel embarrassed. So most people are fairly clued in, it seems. I mean, I am right. It's Velu Pillai Prabhakaran, isn't it? Okay. But most people know quite a lot. So sorry if we, anyway, go over anybody's heads who doesn't know anything at all about Sri Lanka. put out your hands if you don't know where Sri Lanka is. Okay, we're okay, we're okay. So my level of knowledge, keeping a vague eye, I know this, I may be wrong, I'm here to learn myself. So the ceasefire, which went into force a few years ago, has collapsed completely. I'm just giving my understanding. The ceasefire has collapsed. Tigers, I got the impression, have lost ground fairly significantly militarily, especially in the east, but the east in the past couple of years has been complicated by the emergence of the breakaway Tamil Tiger commander Karuna. So you've got a three-way sort of military thing going on in the east. I can't see any prospect of peace talks at all at the moment, and I've got the feeling that the Colombo government, which seems to be quite a sort of coalition government with elements from all over pretty much, is on the whole fairly hard line. Doing just a little bit of research for this over the past couple of days, I've been a bit shocked to find that things are worse, seem to be worse than I was anticipating. Because I was there at a fairly hopeful time, 94 to 96. Chandrika Kumaratunga had just come in after 18 years of the UNP government. She seemed genuinely interested in trying to redress some of the grievances of the Tamil people. There were negotiations with the Tigers, and then during my time there it all went back to war as well. The Tigers resumed the war, and the Sri Lankan army invaded and took Jaffna. So I saw a lot of different things, but just talking recently to a colleague at the BBC, he was telling me that bodies are turning up, there are a lot of disappearances and abductions. He said rather worryingly that he felt the situation was heading back to as it was in 88, 89, which, as you probably know, was the second uprising of the JVP, which was I wasn't there then, but it was a ghastly time which totally traumatized the south of Sri Lanka and led to, I don't know, 30, 40,000 disappearances, I think. It's obviously nothing like that yet, but he said he felt it was kind of heading back in that direction. And the Tigers, I learnt this from one of your films, Juliana, looking at that on the net, are apparently calling this phase the final war. So, my question to the panel really, and I don't know quite who to start with, but let's go to an impartial outsider, or an outsider at least, for the first comment. Am I right to be severely depressed by the outlook at the moment in terms of the possible peaceful resolution of the conflict?
Well, George, I think I'm just as depressed as you are, if not even more depressed. The fact is that the Sri Lankan conflict is in a strategic stalemate. It was in a strategic stalemate in 2001, 2002, which is why the ceasefire of February 2002 came about in the first place. And that situation has not changed. The war is still very much in a strategic stalemate, and it's extremely implausible for either side in the conflict to dream about a decisive military victory, which is what makes the current state of affairs in Sri Lanka, which you so eloquently described right now, not just tragic but completely baffling, because there is no prospect of the strategic stalemate between the two major belligerents being broken now or any time in the near future. So what we are seeing is an outbreak really of extreme nastiness, if that's not too colloquial. A rash of abductions and death squad killings, some pretty serious localized skirmishes, and other such incidents. And there is no glimmer of hope on the horizon, unfortunately, because the parties seem trapped in a spiral of bellicosity.
Sunanda, as an insider's perspective, and also could you comment, Sumatra says that no decisive military victory is possible, but the government, I've read on occasion, is talking about, yes, we can win this conflict in 2 or 3 years.
Yes, that's what we are hearing from the military especially, and not from the political leaders very much. When the General South Fonseca said, I saw yesterday, that they will cross LTT to teach them that a political solution is not possible through violent means. And military is playing more and more political role in a sense, making statements. We haven't seen this very much. It looks like military believes and military thinks that they can really cross LTTE and then hand it over to the government. to whatever political solution that government is going to come up. But the problem here is really the government does not believe that there is a real issue to be solved by the political solution. It's very clearly, President, when he was in New York, he gave an interview to Asia Tribune where he said very clearly, this is only economic problem. Rich Tamils, rich Sinhalese, rich Muslims doesn't have a problem. It's only problem for the poor people. And that's the main issue really has been now. This government came to power on the promise that it will keep the unitary state and it will renegotiate the ceasefire agreement, saying that it will completely renegotiate with the LTT and will not change the country's constitution into the federal law, whatever the old system. And I think in the long run, even if you look at the organizations like which has been openly very critical towards the LTT, like University Teachers for Human Rights, which won Martin Ennals Award recently, and other awards in Norway on Peace Award, it's been very clearly saying that if Sinhala regime does not accept that there is an ethnic issue to be solved, and military victories is not going to take the government to anywhere. I think that's crux of the matter.
Nataraja, from your perspective.
Yeah, I am accept to Sunanda saying, because last 1978 came Jaya Devatana in power. So last 1978 to still today. So every government thinking only military solutions to possible. But practically, even US government ambassador last week also reconfirmed Sri Lankan ethnic issues can't to solved in military solution. So every superpower countries also realized to say Sri Lankan situation. So this present situation in future, practically every people are thinking not too possible in military solution.
But you say every government since 77,
78
have talked in terms of military solutions, but you had these peace talks which went on for a couple of years. They're talking about devolution, autonomy. So I mean, I've forgotten which government started that now.
Yes, because
but, I mean,
peace
at least one government has started.
Yes, peace talk start is Ranil Wickremesinghe in Prime Minister time. But Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga executive power in government. So that time, the President Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga and their ministers not agreed this their government Chandrika Bandaranaike alliance not agreed this peace agreement. That's a problem. So that time only exception in Sri Lankan history. So executive power in one party and other party is parliamentary powers. So executive power Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga keep quiet that time. But after what happened? In Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga take powers in defense ministry and finance ministry, everything. So collapse in ceasefire process.
I think I'm right in saying that it's always been a feature of the conflict in Sri Lanka that the polarization of the two main political blocs has tended to make the approach to the conflict more politically hardline.
Because Sri Lankan history in ruling party in put the solution in opposition against the process.
Yeah.
So every in Bandaranaike period 1956 to still same position, opposition agreed, ruling party agreed any solution given Tamil people, so opposition against.
Could we talk a little bit maybe about the current government? I mean, you introducing yourself talked about you didn't say pro-war, did you say pro-war?
I said pro-war.
Yeah. So you're suggesting that there are, well, would you like to justify calling this government a pro-war government?
Yeah, I mean, they're conducting a war, and it's a government that is believing that the war or that the conflict can be resolved through military means, and they've gone into the east and they've conducted the war there, and they would probably say that they have won the war against the LTT there and are now moving it on to the north. And I guess the question that's being raised is that, yes, the military campaign, I mean, not looking at the civilian toll that there's clearly been, but if you sort of really hard-nosed about it, you could possibly argue that the military campaign has been won. But does that mean the LTT has been driven underground? Will there be more attacks in future? And already in summer there were 2 attacks on Colombo with light aircraft. So has this conflict really been won in the east, or is the LTT reverting back to another form of military resistance?
I mean, they're conducting a war, but would not the government argue that that they tried the peace negotiations route and that the Tigers betrayed their trust, or wouldn't? I mean, presumably that's what they would argue. Are there? I mean, I hear it said that there are strong, and I heard this when I was there in the mid-90s, and I have heard it again in the last few days, that there are strong vested interests within the Sri Lankan establishment which favour the prolongation of the conflict. Could you talk to that?
Well, that could be one reason, but I think the main reason for prolongation of the military conflict is Sinhala regime's inability to come to terms with the ethnic issue and come out with a practical political solution to the issue. And Sinhala regime has never been able. They came very close to it, 59, 65, 2000. Again, two incidents shows this very clearly. When LTT came up with ISGA, we may not agree with that. That's
sorry, ISGA.
ISGA is interim self-governing authority. Because the UNP government gave them at the ceasefire, they gave the set of proposals, very draft. Then LTT came up with their own proposals, very elaborate set of proposals. Maybe we may not agree with that, some of them agree with that. What happened after 3 days after that proposal was submitted, President Kumaratunga, as Guruparan said, took over 3 ministries, thereby started the collapse of Ranil Wickremesinghe's government. When Chandrika Bandaranaike came to power, and then she had election and she won, and then came the tsunami. And after the tsunami, we know what happened, like in Aceh. Sri Lanka also wanted to have a tsunami reconstruction authority, which would have given autonomous power to LTT to rebuild their own areas. And President Kumaratunga favored that. But JVP went to the courts, and Supreme Court, JVP left the government, and Supreme Court said this is unconstitutional. And this is the most recent things that attempts from both sides, one from LTT side, one from the Sri Lankan government side, which tried to have a meaningful negotiation, how it was blocked by one at the judiciary level, one at the political level. And this has been the history of Sri Lanka.
We've kind of lambasted the government. I just want briefly to get, and maybe I might then throw this part open to the floor before we talk about journalistic difficulties. Do you believe, any of you, or do you all believe, that the LTTE have entered into the negotiations that they have this last time? I mean, I was there in '95 when there were the first negotiations, and I saw that go through a particular phase. Do you believe that the LTTE have went into the peace talks with a genuine desire to solve through political dialogue within the framework of a unitary Sri Lanka, I guess, because that is the kind of, no Sri Lankan government in Colombo would ever accept 2 parts of the island, have gone in with a genuine intention of solving it, or have they only entered peace talks for cynical reasons to take time to rearm, to restock, and so on?
I mean, I believe that the LTT were, relatively speaking, more serious about the post-2001 peace process than they were about the brief abortive opening to a peace process that took place when you were in Sri Lanka in the mid-1990s, in 1994 and 1995, which broke down quite quickly, in a matter of months, in fact, in less than a year. One way of describing it would be that in 2002, in 2001-2002, the LTT underwent a strategic shift, which is much less than an ideological shift, because for them, Ilam continued to remain the ultimate and absolutely legitimate goal, and they continued to glorify armed struggle and martyrdom. But it was more than simply an expedient tactical shift. That is, it was not entirely tomfoolery or play acting. A couple of other quick points on what's been said already. Mr. Kulparan said that there's this pattern in party politics in the so-called south of Sri Lanka, in that one party tries to undercut the however tentative peace moves of the other. That's absolutely correct, but there is a big difference between the current situation and past episodes of the same syndrome. If you look at the history of previous decades, it was almost always, if not literally always, the ruling party, the party in office at any one time, that was relatively moderate, relatively accommodationist, open to Tamil aspirations, and it was the opposition party that intended to come back into power, which tried to undercut the ruling party's moves towards any sort of accommodation with Tamil aspirations. Now we have a reversal of that situation, in that it is the ruling party. The ruling party is by no means a monolith, but it is sort of in different ways supported, propped up by two other parties, which are more nationalist in their orientation. It is the ruling party, or at least the clique, the ruling clique of the ruling party, that is in fact, as Juliana referred to, pro-war in its orientation, while it is the opposition party that is, relatively speaking, the more moderate and accommodationist.
This is the UNP.
That is the UNP. Well, the UNP is not a monolith either. It is riven by internal dissensions, factional and personal feuds, etc. But I think, broadly speaking, this is an important reversal of this syndrome of competitive party chauvinism that we have seen in Sri Lanka for 5 or 6 decades now.
Does it make any difference that it's the opposition?
It might, but that's a matter for discussion. The other point I wish to make about the East, the situation in the east of Sri Lanka, is that the LTT has in fact been cleared or semi-cleared, half-cleared, whatever, from the East before. For example, around 1993. But the LTT came back, quite literally, to reoccupy lost ground in the East a few years later, in the second half of the 1990s, when the government withdrew substantial numbers of troops from the East for a major strategic offensive on the northern mainland, the region known as on Jaffna at that time. And then later on the northern mainland on the Vanni. So it's.
But I think the difference this time possibly being that the vacuum has been filled by Karuna's men.
I'm not sure that Karuna's men are a sustainable solution to the vacuum problem, and I mean, as most people in this room surely know, the situation in the East is in a great state of flux. And I don't think that the trumpeting of total or permanent victories is warranted at this stage. If recent history is any guide, it's rather premature to write the obituary of the LTT in the East.
Can I get Nadaraja's just to go back to this issue of whether the Tigers have negotiated in good faith?
This is my argument. This Velipillai Prabhakaran accept or deny, or Douglas Devananda accept or deny. That's not a problem. This government in ruling parties, what is given a solution? Even 1956, SWRD Bandaranaike prepared federal solution. And 65 Dudley Selva Accord, what happened? And Indo-Lanka Peace Accord, what happened? So this is only Prabhakaran came from 1980s. So in Sri Lankan problem start is after the independence. So problem is now Prabhaharan accept or deny, or Douglas Devananda accept or deny, or Anand Sangari accept or deny, not a problem. So government, what are you going to do? Solution, even a solution. So government first prepared this federal or even Indo-Lanka peace accord, or continue the Sri Lankan ethnic solution. So round table talk, or square table talk, or peace accord, or 8-round peace talk, no point. So even armed struggle start 1980s. So but now I think my knowledge, my argument, now military is not a problem, Prabhaharan not a problem. Sri Lankan politicians create more problem in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, no, just a short answer. Given the polarizations and deep divisions that we have in Sri Lankan society, we should not accept any side to enter into any peace process in good faith. Any side will enter into ceasefire agreements with suspicion, getting ready for war. You say in the peacetime getting ready for the war. And I do not think any side in 2001, both sides did not trust other side. They could not have trusted each other. Government did not trust LTT. LTT did not trust the government. You know, both sides prepared for a war. And it is the process. The process is what is very important. The process was not able to create confidence. There was not enough confidence building measures by both sides, LTT side and government sides, I think, to give a kind of real momentum to the ceasefire peace process. That was why Chandrika Bandara Kumaradanga was able to take 3 ministries, because by that time there was a popular feeling among the Sinhala people it's not going to work. LTT started to kill a lot of soldiers, intelligence, military people who were doing intelligence work, and EPDP, a lot of EPDP cadres were killed by the LTT. LTT started to kill a lot of people in the ceasefire agreement, using the ceasefire, all the opportunities created by them. By that time, there was among the Sinhala people, the support to the ceasefire agreement has gone very much down. That's why Chandrika Bandana was able to do that, because there was not enough confidence building measures from the both sides, I would say.
Yeah. That was certainly the case in the first peace talks in '95 as well. You could see how the possibility of getting it going was lost by a sort of very parsimonious attitude on the part of the government, at least, as to trying to build confidence. I don't want to eat up all the time to talk about journalism, so I thought I can if anybody's got a specific point to do with the overall situation, especially if it's maybe hopeful, if anybody's got a positive point, that'd be great. If you could make it brief, because I know we could go on forever on this subject. Yes, sir. There's a microphone which will come to you.
A couple of quick points. One observation.
So could you say who you are?
Yeah, I'm David Joseph. I'm just a Tamil living in UK, and I've been interested in the problem for so long, because that's all I've known all my life. Anyway, one point about Mr. Desapriya's comment. He observed that the military is pursuing military is in favor of pursuing the military solution, but not the political. But I beg to differ on that, because the military is led by the president's brother, and the convergence and the leadership comes from the political leadership for the military, and this is where they are both converging in their interest, and they are not diverse on that. That's one point. The other is about whether or not LTTE was genuine about their intentions when they entered the peace agreement or peace negotiations. 2 points I'd like to point about that. One, before the peace negotiations started, LTTE declared a unilateral ceasefire, and that was in force. It was a unilateral declaration that was in force for 3 months before any negotiations started. That was the first sign. Secondly, LTTE gave up the demand for separate states as it entered the negotiation, and opted for federal solution within the United Sri Lankan setup. And that, in these 2 points, I would say it was genuine intention as it entered. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, I think I should possibly say, I think you were saying that the Sri Lankan military were talking about a victory rather than saying that the politicians were not prosecuting the war.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And the journalist from Sri Lanka, just I want to know whether we are proceeding with the headline, the human rights situation in Sri Lanka. I think we have not gone into that.
No, well, we're going to look at the journalistic difficulties of covering, which we're going to carry on and do. Yes, if you, sir, and then you, sir, and then we'll move on to journalism.
Hi, my name is Arjun Vikramasinghe. I'm the former Reuters correspondent for Sri Lanka and Maldives. First of all, I would like to make a clarification because this was not mentioned by Bose, is it? Dr. Bose? Okay. The LTTE did sit down for 2 rounds of negotiations with this government. And I just want to make that point.
Sure.
And of course, the doors were open to them, and while these talks were happening only, they made, while this initiative was being made only, that they made the attempt on the Army commander's life in Colombo. Just as a reference, I wanted to make that point. And of course, for Sunanda, I would like to ask a question. That is, like, you yourself made the point that, you know, you just can't write the LTT out. Militarily, you said that, and of course you partially accepted the fact that the LTTE did make attempts to rearm, regroup, continued with child conscription, went on with building up their own air force. Now my question is, given experiences from recent history, how realistic is your position that that a political solution to the problem can indeed be reached without militarily defeating / weakening the LTTE?
Could you respond briefly, as briefly as you could?
President Chandrika Kumaratunga used to say that we can kill Prabhakaran, there will be 15 Prabhakarans emerged if you don't give a political solution. That's what President Chandrika Kumaratunga used to say that. As Gurubaran tried to explain, Prabhakaran emerged out of Sri Lankan political situation. Prabhakaran was not there in 59-65 when Sri Lankan political leaders stopped all devolution attempts. And he was a creation. He's not the cause, he is a result. So if we don't really address the core issue, and LTT will re-emerge. If we do that, that will re-emerge. If we don't, as I said, the crux of the matter is that whether the singular ruling regime, maybe Sinhalese, maybe SLP, maybe UNP, maybe JVP, whether singular regime is able to come to terms with the Tamil demands and give meaningful devolution. That's the issue. If we don't come up with that, and Prabhakaran may go, LTT may go, you will still have the fight.
Okay, last one, that guy over there, and then I'm going to move on.
Hello, Arjun Singham, Tamils Rehabilitation Organization in Sri Lanka. It's just a simple question to Dr. Bose. Given the past history of the peace talks, do you think that the South or the Sri Lankan polity is capable of coming up with a political solution that is agreeable to the Tamils of the LTTE?
I don't think that I can give quite as clear-cut a response to that question as you might ideally want. You know, we are in the company of distinguished journalists, and they would tell you that public opinion is something rather fluid. You know, it's not something, you know, set in stone. Sure, there are major obstacles to the so-called Southern polity coming to a realistic appreciation of the need for a settlement with the Tamil question in Sri Lanka. But obstacles are always there in all peace processes, in all divided societies, in all ethno-national conflicts, and they have to be dealt with one way or the other. You know, certainly there is a very deeply ingrained strand in the Southern society and polity that is not favorable, as we would say in Indian English, that is inimical to a realistic settlement with the Tamil question in Sri Lanka. But I don't think that that we need to throw up our hands in despair. These sorts of obstacles are there in all ethno-national conflicts, in all divided societies, in all peace processes, and they need to be dealt with. And public opinion is probably more fluid than is often acknowledged. Of course, there is a lot of demagoguery that goes on. There is a lot of thoroughly irresponsible warmongering that goes on. But then there are, honorable, activists who are trying to buck that trend, who are trying to present a different agenda and a different vision. And I think the battle between the two visions and the two agendas is far from settled.
Okay, we're exactly halfway through, so let's move on to the media. Definitely much worse now than it was when I was there. There were difficulties there, very polarised. You got into trouble for even reporting from the Tamil side. I got very badly attacked just for going to Jaffna and reporting that the Tigers were running a rudimentary administration. But I'm told that 11 journalists have been killed in the last 2 years, and there were none killed in the 2 years I was there. So, Sananda, as the convener of the Free Media Movement, would you like to give an overview of what the media situation is at the moment?
Yeah, let me give you just the context of what's happening here in a short. I looked at the UN report today about the last 3 months, and killings according to all the reports. July 261, September 178, August 209. Civilians killed, September 79, August 50. Disappearances reported to the Human Rights Commission, July 78, August 84. We still don't have September statistics, and IDPs by September 187,356. And if you look at this is the context that human rights violations and violations against the press freedom is taking place. 5,000 people have been died, including soldiers and militants, last 2 years, when 150 or maybe, I don't know, some people 100, maybe more than, maybe 300 people died within the ceasefire agreement, 2 years of ceasefire agreement. So 5,000 has died last 2 years. So it's a ongoing, very intensive war situation that's happening in the country. Now, what is happening? Both sides has taken very strong positions, but government has taken a position of saying that media has to support the war. It has been very clearly, government spokesperson from president to ministers to a military spokesperson has said very clearly, media has to take a side. It has to take a side against the terror, and once terrorist, once liberation fighter, once people is someone else's enemy, because these definitions, so government use these definitions, and that's what government is saying. And in this context, 11 journalists and media workers, not only journalists, has been died in last has been killed, shot dead, all of them shot dead in last 2 years, and 10 of them came from Tamil journalist community, especially in Jaffna today. If you look at Jaffna, the Tamil homeland. International mission who visited Sri Lanka in July last year said these are one of the most dangerous places in the world to report. 90% of reporters in Jaffna newspapers has left the job. They are not coming to work. 3 editors in Udayan newspaper has been living in their office for last 6 months. They haven't gone out of the office, but they just say that they don't go out. And last journalist who was reporting crime in Jaffna was Rajiv Varman, 24 years, young journalist, was killed in August this year, I think April this year. After that, there is no crime reported in Jaffna where at least you find 2 or 3 dead bodies every morning. And there is no one to go to the hospitals and police and ask why he was killed, whether of gunshot injuries or how they have been killed. Virtually, I would say Jaffna is completely, Jaffna, you don't get any information on what is happening in Jaffna today. There are 3 newspapers in Jaffna. They report only from their office, from the telephone. There's no field report, not a single field report. There's only one who is reporting to Sri Lanka. Last journalist who was reporting for AP from Jaffna has to leave because he got a warning from LLM Force. LLM Force supposed to be pro-LTT group, and they asked him the last warning, leave Jaffna. So he has to left Jaffna because he was taken to Jaffna in the same evening by a government plane because that was a very serious warning. So not only one side, every side to the military. At least in Jaffna you have government, military, Karuna, EPDP and LTT. All of them are there. And for journalists, I think Jaffna has been very difficult. Jaffna newspaper, which sold 23,000 copies, has gone down to 5,000 Udayan newspaper. We have there actually with Vidyadharan, who spoke before. He is editor of Udayan and Vidyadharan and Sudaroli. He knows better than the situation. In short, I would say there is a completely pure psychosis among the Tamil journalists. When you see one is killed and all others get silenced, and Uday newspaper, their newsprint stores were set on fire. And until August last year, there was a virtual ban on print ink and newsprint to Jaffna. Because there was a lot of pressure, government allowed limited amounts of newsprint to Jaffna. So there's an embargo from news coming from Jaffna, and newsprint and others going to Jaffna. Colombo also Tamil media has faced really under pressure on reporting. All the news editors from Colombo Tamil newspapers told me that they don't have any Tamil provincial journalists report from Eastern Province. All of them have stopped writing. They only get reports from Muslim journalists. What they get is, politician went and do opening here and there, but not the real story. So what has happened is virtually now real news that is related, like IDPs and resettlement, killings, disappearances. You really don't get the real news from these areas. That's what has happened as a result of the war and as a result of everybody wanting media to report as they want. That's the situation in northern eastern Sri Lanka.
Dr. Raja, you yourself, I understand, were abducted for a day or so. I don't know whether you want. I don't know whether you want to talk at all about that. What happened to you and the kind of pressures that you yourself have faced as a Tamil journalist operating in Colombo.
Yeah, yesterday also mentioned it. I abducted last year, August 29th, after the 23 hours released. But I don't want to say anything my abduction because I forgot it. So because still continue investigation, and I want to leave my country. I want to continue work in journalism, Colombo. So I'm now forgot it.
Okay, there are other Tamil journalists who also been abducted.
Tamil journalist in Sunanda also already said in 11 journalists killed and 10 journalists Tamil. So these 10 journalists Tamil compared than other language journalists and Tamil journalists, more problem Tamil journalists, because some journalists branded pro-LTT, some journalists branded anti-LTT, some journalists branded pro-government, some journalists branded anti-government. So that's a problem Tamil journalists especially facing many problems. In Northeast, my knowledge in our channel, no one report in Northeast news now. Jaffna, our reporter already left in Peninsula, and Baunia reporter already left in Baunia district, and Batikolo reporter keep quiet. So, and Tringamallet reporter also went India. So no one reporting our channel in Northeast. Genuinely, we can't get any news in Northeast. So these 10 journalists killed in meanings. Some journalists branded in many papers in anti-LTT line. Example, Relangi Silva Raja and Balanad Raja. Balanad Raja EPDP paper worked in so many years, and Relangi Silva Raja also worked in SLBC. So other journalists, Udayan, Sudaravli reporters, and other some Tamil paper reporters also killed. So now problem is, Sunanda mentioned it, all parties mean LTTO, other arms group or government or everyone wants to report their own report in war. So Tamil journalist, I think in future in Sri Lanka, no one ready to journalism field.
Right. Now, apart from the danger that journalists face, I'm wondering what what is the impact on the island, on the peace process, on the understanding between Sinhalese and Tamils that there is no news being reported from the north and the east, or those areas which can be heard by Sinhalese in the south? Or what is the impact on society in a sort of general sense?
Yes, general sense in news-wise, because already Sri Lankan media is divided Sinhala and Tamil and Muslim, because Sinhala nationalism, several Sinhala papers or Sinhala media supported Sinhala nationalism. Many Tamil media supported Tamil nationalism. Muslim view also in uprise in after 90s in Muslim nationalism. So media, code of ethics, so media disciplinary, now completely out.
I was shocked to, sorry, go on.
Yeah. So now is zero in journalism field in Northeast.
I read in the Reporters Without Borders annual report published in March, I think, that among the journalists who fled was a Reuters photographer who, I've forgotten the details, or it wasn't given, but I think he'd been drawing attention to the plight of Tamils in the east, and I guess it was photographs of refugees, IDPs and so on, and he's fled to India, which is frightful. Then that's not even a political just to show that there are victims of conflict, and for that to cause you to have death threats is a very frightening thing for the island, apart from anything else. Juliana, would you like to give us a sort of perspective on, because the international media are also being kept out? I gather a Channel 4 team was allowed into Jaffna just very recently and then was expelled after doing a day or so of
yeah, I mean, on this year I wasn't in the north, I was in the east. I've been in the north before. But I think, I mean, one thing there is the fallout that affects journalism, I think, beyond the killings of journalists, is that there's a climate of self-censorship, which goes much beyond actually what journalists can or can't report. It means that anybody you speak to doesn't want to go on record. And I found that in Sri Lanka quite extraordinary sometimes. I mean, it's quite often that you find that local people are worried about going on record, but in the East we could not find an NGO, a Western NGO, that was prepared to decisively talk about what happened in Wakarai, for example, during the military campaign. We had lots and lots of off-the-record talks in the evening, so that I feel we got the right information. And to the credit of UNICEF, who I don't normally and always find very courageous, but once back in Colombo, UNICEF were actually the only people who ended up giving us a report on child abductions and so on. But I thought it was astounding that NGOs were not prepared to talk, because partly I see that to be their role. The other thing that I found interesting, I mean, we've talked clearly about the intimidation and the threats to Tamil journalists, but what I found as well is for the different films, on one film we worked with a local Tamil journalist who was helping us, and on the other film we had a Sinhala journalist who worked with us, and that was about the JHU and the Party of the Buddhist Monks and the government's pro-war policy. And this Sinhala journalist was also incredibly worried, and we discussed how we would conduct all the interviews in advance, and he'd say, okay, I'm your translator. As soon as we go in there, I'm your translator, and we'll make it very clear that it doesn't look to anybody that I'm doing more than that. And some of the interviews we did on our own because he was worried about repercussions. So I think in that sense, this is much bigger, or the effect of all of that, the intimidation, goes much, much further.
Yes.
Just a very brief point. I think that the abduction and subsequent murder of Mr. Dharmaratnam Shivaram, who wrote under the pen name of Taraki, was a crucial tipping point in this engineering of the fear psychosis among the journalistic community. Of course, every human life is equally precious, every journalist's life is equally precious, but at the same time, some liquidations have a greater impact than others, and I think Taraki's elimination is a clear case in point, although it's been more than a couple of years now.
When you talk about fear psychosis, are you talking about among Sinhalese journalists as well as Tamil journalists?
Well, I mean, our colleagues here would be, better able to comment on that. But I think a very useful point has been made by Juliana that the fear psychosis, the climate of intimidation, is by no means limited to Tamil journalists, although they are disproportionately and overwhelmingly affected by the dramatic worsening of the situation. But and especially if it is in fact correct that what Mr. Dishapriya said a while ago, that the current clique in power expects all journalists, especially journalists in the South, to support what has been described as the pro-war policy. I mean, that is an extremely disturbing thing to contemplate in any non-authoritarian or non-totalitarian society.
I wonder, Sunanda, could you say a bit more about the pressures on Sinhalese or Sinhalese
I'll give you an example. I think it was on 10th October, the Director General of Media Center for National Security said, whoever criticizes military forces are a traitor because they are demoralizing the army. This is all media journalist has to clarify their points from this Media Center for National Security, and it's coming from Hulugal, and this has been coming from almost everyone, from president downwards. This is a recent thing after Attas. Actually, Iqbal Attas was one of the well-known defense correspondent and award-winning investigative journalist in Sri Lanka, and he was actually someone he didn't support the ceasefire agreement. He's the one who really assaulted the ceasefire agreement continuously, week and week, saying that LTT is buying airplanes, making airstrip, everything. He exposed all these things when ceasefire agreement was there. He was kind of a darling of anti-war, anti-ceasefire parties at that time. When he exposed that there was a MiG deal, 27, there was 10 MiG, I think MiGs were bought by government, and he said there's a huge corruption going on there, and he was he was branded as a traitor. That's what's happening to the Sinhala journalists. That's a threat, and as soon as you start criticizing or trying to voice dissenting ideas, you are branded as a traitor. And there is actually a phenomena one has to understand. It's something to be actually maybe good to research even the Sinhala tiger phenomena. If you are branded as a Sinhala tiger, usually I have been branded several times as a Sinhala tiger. This meeting will result in unbranding again as Sinhala tiger. Every time we speak about the human rights situation, that will be branded as Sinhala tigers. And it's a deeply divided country, and nationalism, we all know, is very blind, and people follow nationalism, whatever their nationalist leaders say. That when leaders stand up and say that, hey, this guy is a traitor to our country, we are fighting the LTT. LTT has killed so many Sinhalese people, killed so many Buddhist monks. They are not criticizing LTT, they are only criticizing us, they are asking human rights from us, they are traitors. This is the way, that's the thrust from the government to intimidate journalists. And even if you look at again that interview with President gave to Asia Tribune, he very clearly said human rights organizations in Sri Lanka work in a way that they support tigers. Comes from the president. And second thing is a denial. Government has never accepted that there has been serious human rights violations in the country. And in that interview, the Kenyan president says a lot of cases reported they went on honeymoon with their boyfriends and they have come back, these people. These disappearances. Actually, Asian Human Rights Commission, government has appointed a commission to look at disappearances, and judge came and said that some of them have came back. The Asian Human Rights Commission wrote an open letter, asked them, please give us the names who has come back. There has been no response yet. So, it is such a disinformation campaign and intimidation campaign, branding every dissenting opinion as supporting the tigers. Even Mangala Samaravira, former foreign minister, the day he changed his seats to the opposition, he was branded as a tiger supporter. And because of this, I think no Sinhala journalist really will take up the issues of IDPs, IDPs who have been resettled forcefully, and killings in the eastern province. And there was an incident that in Jaffna, Colombo harbour, banner headlines, all the television stations carried that. 5 LTT boats came to attack LTT harbour, and one boat was destroyed, and 5 tigers were arrested. All 5 were released without any problem. They were just simple fishermen from Colombo. They were fishermen on record. If we reported that at that time, journalists cannot report that. We knew that what happened because we knew these people from Negombo, and they came to the media and said that these are our people, they are not terrorists, they are not LTT, they are innocent people. But we can't report that. If we report it, until judgment comes, you can't write that. Even judgment comes, nobody will say that these are innocent people. I can say that there are so many incidents like that that has happened. 4 students were killed in Vaunia, said that they died because of their own hand grenade, and now government has charged some military personnel for killing these youth. If we reported at that time, we would have branded as tigers. So we really do not have independence to report what is happening from our own sources. We always have to go to the military from this side. If you are reporting, I think, Tamil newspapers or in the Tamil LTT areas, that's the LTT point of view. There's no middle path. We have lost, as Sri Lankan journalists, our role as observers. We have to take part in one of the struggles, this side or that side. That's a tragedy.
I mean, there's always been this tendency when the conflict has been high, but is this worse than it was before the peace talks started or at previous times?
I think the simple example is that we never had 11 media, the workers and journalists killed in 2 years, and we never had 3 newspapers closed because of the war situation. Maubimani Standard Weekly, and now the Leonardo in Jaffna, and never had newspaper stores have been set on fire, and all these things. If you put all these things together, easily the quantity becomes quality if you put all these things together, and then only you will be able to understand what kind of fear psychosis is there among them. Because when they, day in and day out, when the government, after a military victory, seeming military victories, at least the military victories after the East, and say that we are going to capture Warning, you shut up. That's the message.
Is it relevant to ask about the role of the foreign media? I mean, for instance, BBC, similar Tamil services. I mean, has this climate of fear and intimidation made them more valuable, more useful, or are they also subject to the same pressures and problems, or are they too minor to be significant in terms of their listenership and their ability to report what's going on?
Well, they don't censor themselves as us, but I know, because I know them, I talk to them quite often, because they had to rebroadcast through the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation owned by the government. And BBC World Service, English World Service, has 8 hours in SLBC, and actually SLBC is run by BBC nowadays because BBC pays so much money. Otherwise government would have to close it down. That's one reason government allows SLBC Sinhala Sandese on it. Anyway, they have some kind of, I think, self-censorship, not like us. That's remarkable that in a way Sandese has been able to carry out in such a way that they try to get all sides and better reports than any other news outlet in Sri Lanka. I think it's credit to them. Although all these complications, it's still credit to them. They try to get better. They try to portray North. They don't have someone from North and Eastern Province in much better way, much balanced, fair, and way than all other news outlets. But others don't have now, like AP, they lost their man. In Jaffna, Reuters doesn't have someone, AP doesn't have, FP doesn't have anyone. They used to have their people. No foreign agency have someone working there. What they have done is they have hired strangers working without name, anonymously, to the Reuters and I think AFP also. That's how they get the news. But when when you get news without byline, the credibility is really become a problem.
At this point, we should probably open it to the floor.
Can I just maybe add?
Yes, please,
I think there are 2 more things. I mean, one is a complete absence of any investigations. There have been big murders in the 2005 big murder of the editor, and I think the problem is because there is no semblance of an effort being made that anything or anybody is being investigated, and the enemy to the journalist is so unclear because it can be seen to come from the side of the government or from the side of the LTTE, and then you do have the paramilitary groups who can act in different interests. I think, so given that there are no investigations and journalists don't know what they're up against, I think that made the problem worse. And then, of course, the other problem that you have as a journalist when you do start working is that your access is very clearly defined. So even if you do manage to work, and for example, if you go in as a foreign journalist, who you speak to and what you see is very much narrowed down by everybody, certainly by the government, but also if you arrive at the right time and you can go into the north and you can go into the Vani, then it is next to impossible, or at least I found it very difficult to do any objective reporting out of the LTTE held areas.
Yeah, exactly.
So even if you do report
by the LTTE.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, and not just, I mean, I found that the restrictions to the degree that, again, the intimidations, even, and it was one of the few countries where this happened to me, even when I was left to wander around on my own, which is normally the time when somebody will come to you and you sit down under a tree, and I was waiting to get access for ages. I had 3-4 days to sit under a tree and talk to people. And nobody will talk to you. And people literally said, we are worried that if something happens after you leave, somebody will think that it was because I talked to you, and somehow somebody will manufacture a cause and effect. And I was quite struck by that, because normally you go somewhere and you chat.
I mean, one shouldn't draw equivalences, probably, but I mean, it has to be said that despite, you know, this terrible sense of intimidation and so forth in the south, and that's always been the case in LTTE areas, far and beyond.
As it has never accepted press freedom. No press freedom, no dissent in LTTE held areas. That's LTTE rule from the beginning. It has never allowed any dissenting voice in their areas.
Right, well, let's have points and questions, and I was talking, you know? No. Right. Well, start at the front and work backwards. You, sir.
Hi, my name is Andrew Kendall. I have a history with Sri Lanka going back to 1994. Monitored the last 4 national elections in the country, and I've done consultancy work with Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International on Sri Lanka issues in the last 12 months. I'd like it if the panelists could comment. It's not strictly an issue about the journalists, as Juliana mentioned. It's also about the NGO workers. And there's been, depending on who you talk to, at least 40 NGO workers,
53.
all local, killed since the beginning of last year. So there's a very good reason why there is fear amongst the NGO workers and why information is not coming out from them. And I would think that that needs to get highlighted here a bit more. That's all I'd like to say.
My name is Vimala Sekara. I'm just wondering, Sri Lankan situation is not normal at the moment. We all accept that, because the government is, although it's not at war with India, Pakistan or China, it is at war with a certain terrorist group in the opinion of the government. And that is the view of the vast majority. This is because the LTTE has taken up arms in order to ask for or carve out Sri Lanka, out of Sri Lanka, a separate state, a racist state. And how, my first question is, how is it possible to carve out a separate state for Tamil people when there are more Tamils living outside the so-called traditional areas in Colombo? There are over 400,000 Tamils living in Colombo itself. So Colombo's population is about 1 million. And when put Muslims and Tamils together, the Sinhalese are in a minority in Colombo. And the next point is, out of the total population of the Sri Lankan Tamil, about 1 million are living abroad now. They are not going to go back, even if there is the proposed ELAM is created. Do you think that they will go back? They will never. Only thing what they would do is they will fund the LTTE. I know because most of the people who have come out of that area.
Please, can you let him finish his point?
Run out. It is natural that people are economic migrants. It's natural. Everybody will go for better pasture. It's a natural thing. The British people or Scottish people have gone into Far East, Africa, all that for betterment. Likewise.
So,
anyway.
Could you wind that up? Because, I mean, nobody is advocating ELAM on this platform.
So,
it's not the subject of the discussion.
With regard to journalists, what I am saying is that during the World Wars, during the Second World War time, I do not think that the British, there would have been journalists writing out reports in favor of Germans. They would have been writing out condemning Germans, supporting the British. At a wartime, they will have to support responsible journalism. And during that time, even the German Shepherd was not called German Shepherd, it was called Alsatian. So that is how it was.
Thank you very much. I mean, that's a point. It's an interesting point that there's a war going on, and he's saying that, you know, from the South's point of view, the Sri Lankan or the Sinhalese point of view, whatever it is, you know, because there's a war going on, certain things have to be, you know, journalistic freedoms are restricted. It's an understandable point from that point of view. Sir. I actually know, so the gentleman in front of you, but yeah. Yeah, no, you got it, you got it. Oh. Yes, him.
My name is Sri Lankan, I'm a journalist. You know, we have been discussing this matter threadbare at various seminars, you know, from 1958. You see, in 1958, there was a Tamil priest in Panagura, south of Colombo, they poured oil on him, you know, and they burnt him to death. And they all danced around him. That was the beginning of the whole thing, you see. And then it went on and on, 1958, 1976, 1977, 1983, and it's gone on and on and on. And as for a military victory, you see, the American ambassador need not tell us that there is no military victory. Any sane person, even Juliana in her private moments will tell you that there can never be a military victory, you see. Vimala Sekaras can come and go, you see, but, you know, and Buddhist can come and go. But, you see, there will never be a military victory. Right. Now, what we want to know, gentlemen, is this. Now, this meeting is being held in London. We are addressing particularly the journalists from the international sphere. Now, what on earth are you people going to do about this? You know the truth. You have been there on the soil and you have seen for yourselves. You see, Vimala Sekaras or even Sodhinadans can't hide the truth from you. You have seen for yourselves at first hand and you bloody well know the truth. You are the people who have to solve this problem and tell the world. People like Gordon Brown, George Bush, Tony Blair, and all these cunts. You see, these fellows who pretend to run the world. You have to tell them, look here, you can't bluff all the time. You see, we are calling the shots now. This is where we want to hear from you what you have got to do. You have heard from everybody. You're talking about the role of the international, Palestine and all that.
You're talking about the role of the international media.
Please, okay, I would like a cogent answer from you.
The lady at the back there, please.
Thank you. I'm quite glad what the gentleman just said. My name is Helen and I took part in the monitoring, the Sri Lankan monitoring mission, and was the spokesperson, so I had to deal a lot with journalism. From my point of view, a lot of the conflict had to do with the actual reporting. We had a lot of reporting that was just wrong, and we saw, even when the conflict hadn't started, and I mean military conflict, the preparation was very much taking place in the papers, and it was a war of words. And I'd like to just hear from the panel, how much do you think that the actual reporting and the actual, I would say, bad influence of the journalism had to do with the conflict? And I'm very glad that the gentleman mentioned the international community, because I would like to hear also a little bit more about the international community and the facilitators as well. Thank you.
Well, so can we have some response to that? How far did the local media, to start with, help prepare the ground for the return to conflict?
I think in most of the conflicts, ethnic conflicts, media play the role. Media is part of the conflict. Problem is not a part of the question. Most of the ethnic struggles in Sri Lanka, it's more true. In Sri Lanka, media has divided the country before LTT is dividing the country. If you look at the media, Tamil media and Sinhala media reports completely different way. If you read those newspapers, you will see you will in two different countries. And I agree with you that SLMM never get fair, balanced coverage in Sri Lankan newspapers, because the anti-foreign feelings and all these feelings were put together, and there was no rational reporting on the Sri Lanka monitoring mission. We all had analyzed this situation. I think it's because Sri Lanka was colonized country. It's very easy to say that whites are coming and going to teach this side, going to take this side or country away, although when we hear that they have to solve the problem, when they go to help it, they say, you go away, we will solve our problem. That's what happened. I think I agree with you. It's a major, media plays a major role in keeping Sri Lankan conflict, both sides, not one side. Because we don't have, because I don't speak Tamil after 30 years in peace process. I have been a peace activist, also media as well as for 30 years, but I don't read Tamil. And there have been so many researches that have been done. Tamils and Sinhalese have become so monolithic communities, not like in old days. In the parliament, there's not a single politician who can speak in Tamil. And Tamils somehow try to learn Sinhala because that's happened. Minorities always try to learn major language. But if you look at Sri Lanka, none of us know what is in the Tamil newspapers. Tamils doesn't know what is the single newspapers. If you had one language newspapers, I think we probably could have had better newspapers which could play a better role. English newspapers, of course, play much better role than Sinhala and Tamil newspapers, as some of them.
Do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, even one organization print in different language, or one organization broadcast different language in different report. That is true in Sri Lanka. In one organization in reporting different report Sinhala and different report in Tamil.
Or different facts
yeah,
on an incident.
Yeah,
different interpretation.
Different reputation, different view.
So they're reflecting the incredible polarization in society. You mentioned international media as well, and I'd like for us to try to address that. But what's your point with regard to the international media? Because what can the international media do really?
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough that before the conflict really started, we still had a voice, yes or no. And so I had a lot of interviews with the international media, and I think the frustration was always that it was being underreported, and we know that this is the case. But what scares me as well, and I think you mentioned there, is that not the self-censorship isn't really just happening inside the country. It has been trickling further out, because I know that a lot of my colleagues, international ones, will also be very careful about what they say, because they know that they will have limitations. This goes for both sides of the conflict, definitely. But there is not just a self-censorship in Sri Lanka, it's also the international media.
Thank you. Gentleman in front of you there.
Me?
Yeah, did you want to speak?
Thank you very much. Thank you. My name is Ivan Pedro Pillai, retired senior executive. My point is that there are two ways that the media, particularly international media, should be looking at the situation in Sri Lanka. One is listening to you, George. After you left that country, you have yourself admitted that you hadn't been very conscious of what's happened there. And that I'm not surprised, because that's the way people in this country are. I've been here 40 years. And I think there are two things that I said. One is to report the incidents that happen. That is like reporting, as I see it, is reporting a boxing match or something like that. You're reporting round by round who has won what and all that. Okay, that's interesting, but that's not really the long-term thing we are looking for. The long-term thing is to first establish, and this I need to ask the international media to do an in-depth analysis of what the problems were and are still for the minorities in that country, particularly the Tamils, and what a repressive Sri Lankan ultranationalist Sinhala Buddhist government is doing to keep the minorities suppressed, particularly the Tamils. So you need to provide an analysis, and that needs some history. And unless the international community sees and understands what's happened over the years, it will only take a passing interest in who's winning what episode. Human rights are very important. Please report that and bring the government to book for what it is doing, committing such atrocities. But I think in the long run, you need also to report, and having been here 40 years, and as Britt, I'm saying, you have a responsibility, almost a sacred responsibility, to report the deprivations, the deaths, the destruction of the Tamils in their homeland. And by just reporting incidents, you're simply feeding that sort of voyeuristic interest of the Western people. Go on and also do a political analysis, in-depth, please. And that's all I ask you. You in the international media have a responsibility to do that.
I mean, I can't speak, obviously, I can't speak for the international media, but I mean, I should just point out again that access is a major, major problem. I mean, there was a Channel 4 team went to Jaffna just recently, and they were expelled after a day. I'm not allowed to go. I mean, I've done a couple of stupid things maybe in Sri Lanka, but primarily I was banned because I was so angry at an election which was manipulated back in 2000, and that made me extremely angry to see how it perpetuated the war. I mean, outside of the international media, most of it obviously just skims the surface of a place as unimportant, I put in quote marks, as Sri Lanka. And those media who have the ability or the desire to go deeper under the surface are subject to an awful lot of restrictions. And nobody is allowed to go to tiger-held areas at the moment, as I understand it. I mean, you've done some very good work, Juliana.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to disentangle things a little bit, because I think it's important to ask us as journalists to provide proper analysis and obviously to do ethical reporting and so on. But I also felt a little bit what was coming forwards is a request to find solutions, and I don't see my role as somebody wherever I go, I cannot find solutions. That is not my role, and it would be great for everybody if I could. What I hope to do is hopefully provide an analysis, and I very much try my best to go beyond a news piece, and that's why I like in current affairs and in longer formats as opposed to news, to go beyond it and provide an analysis, but I cannot find solutions. And I think anybody as a Western foreign journalist who probably reports on Sri Lanka has a particular kind of commitment, because Sri Lanka is a forgotten conflict, and what goes on in Sri Lanka is rarely in the headlines. So I would say most of the colleagues that I know, and hopefully myself, we've been there because it's a place that we care about. I would say it's probably not the place where you go to have a career as a journalist. So, which sounds incredibly crude, but I think that's realistic. So a lot of Western journalists who are there are quite dedicated and do try and stay in touch. And we've got to be realistic, because for us as journalists, it's also frustrating what we can actually put on air. We would all like to make longer programs, nothing rather than that. But, 21 minutes is a celebration in this day and age to do as much as that. So I hear the frustrations, but I also share them, and, a few of us are trying to do the best that we can.
But you can also be an agent for change.
Yes, but I think through good reporting and through trying to be the most objective and putting a plurality of voices on and allowing different sorts of people to speak on all sides and up in the government and IDPs, all sorts of people. But that is how I see my role as bringing about change.
That has to be the role of the foreign reporter. We've
Yes.
heard how the media in Sri Lanka has been polarised, and one Tamil journalists and Tamil newspapers and Sinhalese newspapers reporting different things because they're polarised. So all the foreign media at their best can do is, as Juliana says, to give a plurality of views, so as to try to at least throw up into the air what we can find out is going on and what people are saying. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Tara Swift. I'm just here because I want to update my information about Sri Lanka. It's something I was aware of, maybe about 30 years ago, something like that. It looks, it's a very big picture. It looks to me like the only people who are benefiting in Sri Lanka are the armed dealers. It seems to be, this armed conflict being fueled. My question is, please excuse my ignorance. Who's actually arming the LTTE? You can't exactly buy a fighter plane on eBay, can you? Well, and the other thing is, I wanted to say, I mean, the gentleman, respectfully, he said anybody who criticizes the army is branded a traitor. Well, welcome to Britain. Because if you happen to be a Muslim and you don't condemn the killing of British soldiers in Iraq, you are branded as a terrorist sympathizer. So, I mean, the gentleman over there has got some point to say. I mean, she seems to be judging the. I'm not condoning the terrorizing of the media, but you seem to be, judging the media in Sri Lanka with very high standards, which in here, I have to say to you, after all the lies they've been told, they still are a compliant media in this country, largely. Thank you.
No, I think we have to finish it.
I was going to say, I tended to agree with Juliana's position that it's not necessarily journalists' role to come up with solutions to the political situation. I spent 3 months, predominantly in Tamil Tiger-held country about 7 years ago, walking 400 kilometres from Trincomalee along the east coast and crisscrossing the conflict zone. Interestingly enough, I had a lot of access to people from both sides to give their positions, but I think the problem today is that, as reinforced in the comments, that journalists are not getting to the truth. You're either entrenched in one side or the other, and I found that very much so as well. Even though I maintained my integrity and my independence, I found that I was either LTT-controlled area, and then there was very much a dominance and pressure. In fact, there was a Sinhalese with us who disappeared. Who knows what happened to him? And then if I was in the Sinhalese camp, there was a very strong position held there. And probably the best interview that I did was a monk, a priest, who was in a national park, who had one son killed by one side and one son killed by the other. And he just wanted to be in devotion to God Katragama and continue with his work. And I think, in summary, it's really down to the people in Sri Lanka to resolve this problem, or an international organisation to put some pressure, but that's been tried in the past and failed. But it really needs that sense of responsibility. It's certainly not the journalist's position. Journalists are there to, if they have access, to give an insight into the position, but politically it needs to be a resolution, and I think there are reasons why there isn't a resolution, and that's to do with each side benefiting from keeping that power and keeping this continuous momentum that's been going on for decades now, and is nowhere near a solution it was when I was there. And it's a great tragedy, and it's a very small, insignificant island on one level, and yet so much violence and so much madness going on. Anyway, sorry.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to... well, I know, Pearl, you... Okay. Last word to Pearl. Please say who you are.
I'm Pearl Devanayagam, exiled journalist from Sri Lanka, covered from 90 till 2001. My association with the international journalists there is, you want some, I know there is censorship, I know there is the media laws, all that. It prohibits us from entering areas. But as Anandi Suryaprakasan, a veteran BBC journalist, would say, she had easy access into the areas. And I will tell you what it is. The attitude of foreign journalists is cameras, the whole show, white skin, dash. No local wants that. You have to blend in with them, camouflage. A lot of people get holed up in hotels. When tsunami happened, East was affected badly. But what was reported was Galle, because Sky News came early. Was holed up in Galle because it's a 5-star hotel. You don't have hotels in the East. Therefore, I cannot go because there's no air conditioning.
I think you've got to be careful what you're saying. I sort of find that a little bit offensive.
Why is it that we can go? I have been there several times.
No, I'm afraid to really differ because, it's a political attitude that gives you the access, not your color.
Excuse me?
Political attitude that gives you the color. I tell you frankly, if LTT looks at you as not anti-LTT journalists, you get the access. If you are considered as someone moderate, someone critical, you will never get access. That's the truth.
Well, I think it's appropriate, given this is Sri Lanka, that there is no conclusion we can draw, and it could probably go on forever. So all I can do is thank you very much to all the panelists and to everybody for coming. Thank you very much.